Hello, and welcome to Quality Time, the podcast made just for Nebraska's early childhood providers who are growing every day through Step Up to Quality. I'm your host, Laura Cady. Whether you're tuning in during snack time, cleanup, or your drive home, we're so glad you're here. Each episode, we shine a light on the real work happening in early childhood programs across Nebraska, because quality is something we built together. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome two incredible coaches, Brenda and Michelle. Both are Step Up to Quality coaches and literacy early learning guidelines trainers, and they bring years of experience supporting programs across Nebraska. I bet many of you who are listening may be very familiar with Brenda and Michelle. So together, they have seen firsthand how literacy practices can deepen quality and how programs can make literacy a joyful part of everyday learning. Brenda and Michelle, welcome to Quality Time. Michelle, could you please share a little bit about your background? You know, I love to learn about our guests, so please share a little bit about you.
Absolutely. Well, first, I'm just delighted that you're having me here. So thank you for that. As far as my background, gosh, basically my entire adult life, I have found ways to work with children. And then later with the individuals, like your listeners, who work with children. So first I started off as a center-based teacher, became, over time, assistant director. I taught at UNL for 25 years in the College of Education and Human Sciences. And during that time, teaching courses as a professor, but also had the honor of directing the Ruth Staples Child Development Laboratory. So a wonderful, wonderful place to be. And then, of course, as a trainer and consultant and now coach for early childhood programs across Nebraska. So bringing lots of experiences in early childhood to our discussion today.
Well, that sounds like an understatement. Wow, you have quite a wealth of experience. Thank you so much for sharing a bit about yourself. Brenda, you go ahead when you're ready.
Thanks so much, Laura. And like Michelle, I started in early childhood in a kindergarten classroom, but I have the unique opportunity. My husband was in the Air Force, and so we moved frequently. And so we arrived at our first duty station. I kind of oddly ended up as the director of the Child Development Center, and that really laid the path for me in being able to direct or be in a management position and administration position within the early childhood world. I've worked as a center director. I've worked as an assistant director. I've been a training specialist. I've worked in intergenerational programs where programs are housed within nursing home facilities, but always with that touch, that piece of early childhood and knowing the critical impact that has on our children. We don't always know what those kiddos are going to grow up to be, but we know those early years are critically important.
Wow. Wow. So basically, I'm going to learn a lot today from you two. This is exciting. Okay. So, our listeners, many of our listeners are Step Up to Quality providers. So if you don't mind just sharing, we'll start with Brenda. How long have you been a Step Up to Quality coach, and what is it that keeps you interested and engaged in this work?
I have been coaching since 2019, and I really have found that this is like an amazing role. I love to work with programs, both family child care and center-based programs that want to improve quality. You don't always come upon that. Sometimes folks are kind of okay where they are, but I get to be their cheerleader. I get to help them see all of the great things that they're already doing. I'm on their team. And for me, that's really exciting. I can share what I know, but also help them problem solve. And again, pause and remember, like, good things are happening. And I think that's so important for our programs.
So I am only about a year into coaching, and I'm learning so much about not only the work and this role, but also about myself and how I'm approaching every interaction, not just in my professional world. And so I think a lot of it is we talk about at Buffett, at least, is a lot of that is the strength based and thinking about your thinking, that metacognition, like how are we, just having someone to reflect with, because I think in this busy world and this busy profession, sometimes that's missing. So yeah, that's incredible to hear about your experience with Step Up to Quality, and I can't wait to learn more. So what about you, Michelle? Tell us about your background with Step Up to Quality.
So I've been coaching for 5 or 6 years with Step Up to Quality, and a lot of what you and Brenda just said is what keeps me doing it. It's that to be able to be hands-on in programs. Some days, I'm going to be honest, some days I really miss having my own program or having my own classroom. Some days, I recognize the really hard work, and I'm kind of okay with the fact that other people can carry on that legacy. But being able to be in programs on a regular basis, to see the kids, to see the teachers, as Brenda said, to be their cheerleader, to say, like, you got this. I think so often, especially in center-based programs, you don't even necessarily, you have colleagues, but you don't necessarily have the opportunity to really chat with each other.
Yeah.
To really reflect on your practices and what you're doing. And so what keeps me doing this is I want to support programs. I want to support providers who are really focused on improving quality and providing the very best start for children that we can. As Brenda said, we know that these first years are critically important to not just things like academic success, but really to who these little people are going to be in later years and as adults. And how cool is it that we get to have influence on their early experiences as they're building that self-concept and, well, quite literally building their brains. I can't imagine a more powerful opportunity to influence our future. So that's what keeps me coming back.
I love it. Yeah, not only supporting the kiddos, but their families, their educators, their caregivers, all of them. Yeah, you're touching, you're impacting many people. So I am excited to learn how we're going to connect this with literacy, because you know me, I'm always looking for ways. So here I come. Here it comes. As you know, literacy is woven into so many parts of children's early learning. In your role as literacy early learning guideline trainers, how do you help the programs that you coach see the connection between literacy and overall quality?
Well, as you said, there is a really strong connection between early literacy and later academic success. We know that early literacy, which begins with talking, we know that those early literacy skills help build, language. They help build vocabulary, but they also contribute to things like cognitive development. The experiences that they have early on contribute to later, reading comprehension, actually to better performance in all academic areas. And so, that really language rich environment, an environment that is full of stories and conversations and engaging activities really provides the foundation for children's cognitive development, their social emotional development. It builds critical thinking skills. It builds empathy as they listen to stories and think about, the characters' experiences and how they're feeling. And of course, we know if we can influence children so that they fall in love with books and they fall in love with stories, then we have opened up a wide world of opportunities. Because once you get your hands on books, there's really no stopping you. So there's a pretty strong connection between that early literacy and success, really in every domain, in every area.
Okay, thank you so much, Michelle. Very great answer, Brenda. Do you have a little bit? No pressure.
Yeah. So one of the things I think that we're able to do as early learning guidelines trainers is really um, help early childhood educators see what they're doing already. Are they singing to children? Early literacy. Are they talking with children? That's early literacy. And are they reading yet to young children? It all matters. And I think when they're able to see they're already supporting, and then there are like quick, simple, free things that they can do to add to that, as Michelle said, then that supports their overall learning and it leads to academic success. Every parent, every early childhood professional wants children to succeed. So this just lays that really great groundwork.
Yeah.
It does matter, but it's also easy to do.
I was going to say, it just kind of takes off the pressure. I think sometimes there is pressure with early literacy, reading literacy, and it really is having a habit, having a routine, those, like you said, stories, play, imagination, joy, all of that. So those are very wonderful ways. Thank you both for sharing. And I love both of your perspectives. They're unique and connected as well. So I can tell that both of you are very passionate about your work and that you have a lot of stories. I can just tell that right away. So I would love to hear something like a specific example that you've observed, maybe a powerful aha moment with a provider, maybe even something smaller, some little subtle shift that showed how literacy practices can strengthen quality in classroom. And Brenda, why don't you start, please?
Laura, that's a hard one, but some
Just to pick
things.
one. Only one. Just kidding. You can have two if you want.
Great. I remember once doing an early learning guidelines training and having our participants say, I just talk to the babies all the time. It was just natural for me to do. But now I see that's a really important thing that I'm doing. And so those light bulb moments, so important. I love to go into a preschool classroom and they have that visual schedule displayed. And children are using a marker, moving it from time of day to time of day, talking about what they've already done, what they're going to do next. They're supporting literacy with that simple left to right progression. They're using those photos as contextual clues so the children can read what they see. It's just so exciting when they begin to see that connection. Or when you see a young child playing teacher and they line up the baby dolls or the stuffed animals and they read to them, you know that love of reading is there already. And that's fantastic.
I love it. Oh, okay. So Michelle, what about you?
Well, much like what Brenda said, it's hard sometimes to narrow down to one or even two examples. But I think about a preschool teacher in a center-based program that I was working with. And this particular preschool teacher, she had what we'd call the older preschoolers. They were all going to be headed to kindergarten in the fall. And I was chatting with her about, when do you read to the kids and how do you share stories? And she said, well, I really don't. I really don't because these kids just, they don't have the attention span. They just can't sit and listen to a story. And it ends up being a hassle. And I just, gosh. And I thought to myself, wrong, no, that not
Right.
not accurate. They can. But how do I approach this? And so I said, well, what do you think? Would it be okay if I came in and tried reading a story to the kids? Now I know it might be a disaster. You said it might be a disaster, but could I just try it and see how it went? That's going to help me understand a little bit better. And so she said, sure. She didn't really think it was going to be very successful. But anyway, I came in, I had prepared, how am I going to transition the kids onto the rug? So we sang a few finger plays. How are we going to transition into the book, etc. And the kids were wonderful. They were sitting and so attentive. And one little guy in the front row, I will remember him forever. He looked at me so seriously and he goes, I like you. You should come back. And I was just like, oh, I like you too. And I had finished the book and they said, oh, can you read another one?
Mhm.
And because I had thought, well, you never know, I did bring a second book with me. So I said, okay. And I brought that out. And at the end of this lovely experience, I was debriefing with that teacher. And I asked her, I said, so how do you think it went? She said, oh, it was great. And I said, well, why do you think that is? And she said, well, I think you're just good at it. You're just good at that
Mm.
stuff. And I said,
Mhm.
well, as much as I would love to say, oh, that's probably it. I said, actually, nah, not really. I said, what did you see? What did I do? What did you see me do that you thought the kids enjoyed or that they responded to? And so, she said, well, you didn't just launch into the book. First, you did this, And so I said, well, could you do that? She said, yeah. I said, okay,
Mhm.
great.
Mhm.
And I said, well, what else did you notice? And so the part that I think was really successful is that then we broke it down into observable and traits that you could replicate.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes we look at good teachers at all ages and we think that person's just magic,
Mhm.
but they're really not. They're using some sets of skills. And so, it's one of those. Uh, I do. I love reading to kids,
Right.
but it's bringing that passion and excitement. It's telling the kids, like, oh my gosh, wait till you see what I have today.
Yeah.
And you're constantly selling to them. And then of course it's the idea of, and what I showed with her too is, and then you wrap it up while they still want more,
Yep. Yep.
so
Mhm.
that we're leaving on a high note. But I think that was just one of those memories that I have of just being really successful in helping that teacher see that yes, indeed, she could do that.
It's a really good example, and I hope you know I'm taking notes as a newer coach. I'm like, ooh, that's good. That's good because modeling it in a way that's really, you are trying to get more information as a coach to understand how do we, which path are we going to go down. And so I just think that's so wonderful to give her the opportunity to observe her students and their engagement and their excitement. And then it wasn't an easy conversation either to say, oh, well, I just don't think I have the skills, because that's hard for teachers to say. I think it's hard for parents sometimes as well. Not all parents are super comfortable with read alouds or that type of literacy experience. So that's a great example. I always felt like I was an actress when I taught first grade for a long time, first and third. And it turns out I'm an introvert. And so teaching all day with 6 year olds is really challenging. And I had to kind of pivot my career a little bit because of that, which was really, really hard. And like you were saying earlier, oh, sometimes I miss when you were talking, when you were sharing that story, I was just sitting there. I was a kid sitting there listening to your story. So I have that feeling sometimes too, like missing having your little family of students. So thank you so much. That was great. So Brenda, what about you? Any aha moments with a provider or some shifts that you've seen, how literacy practices can strengthen quality in a classroom?
Can I share one more story?
Please.
I just love this story. And it's not so much from a provider perspective, but years ago in a program that I was directing, I was in the preschool classroom and we had a writing center. And in the writing center, we had an old blue electric typewriter that, we had transitioned to computers, but we thought, oh, that would be kind of fun to include for the kids to kind of play around with. So one little girl who was 4 had been sitting at that typewriter and she had filled almost an entire page with random letters. And so I walked over to her and I said, wow, you are really working hard. And she said, yeah, I'm writing a book. And I was like, cool. That is so cool that you're writing a book. That takes a lot of effort. And she said, yeah, I am really working. And I said, I cannot wait till your book is finished. I said, what is your book about? And then she looked at me and she very seriously goes, well, I don't know. I can't read. And I loved that because I also loved the fact that, I mean, first of all, you got to just love their thinking. But
Yeah.
secondly, this is a child who she can't read, but gosh darn it, she can write a book. And she,
Right.
think of that confidence that it's, from her perspective, I can work at this for a long time. And once I'm able to decode and once I'm able to actually read, I'm going to figure out what my book's about and it's going to be awesome.
Oh, it's so
That
funny.
to me is the kind of confidence we want all of our kids to go to kindergarten with. That whole idea of like, bring it on. Because like, I'm good at this learning stuff. Just bring it
And
on.
that encouraging that because maybe not all teachers, providers, parents would encourage in that way, right? Like, wow, they might say, well, that's not that you're just writing letters, and not in a negative way, but
Yeah,
I think it's magical the way that you can really encourage that. So thank you so much. I knew you two had stories. I could see it from the moment we started. Okay, so how about you've shared some already, but if you can think of any other just simple developmentally appropriate strategies that our providers who are listening could use right away to bring literacy into their daily routines. Michelle,
absolutely.
yeah, what do you think?
I mean, of course, we're both going to say read to kids, read to kids, read to kids. But something that I think sometimes we don't think about today because it seems kind of old fashioned is nursery rhymes. Do nursery rhymes with kids. They love the cadence, the rhyming. Um, Nursery rhymes really do lay that foundation for later reading skills. The rhyme, the rhythm, the patterns. It really helps kids hear the sounds that make up words, which we all know is essential for later reading. And so, that's one thing that kids love to hear them. They love to act them out. There's lots of good books if you want illustrations. So that, I mean, that's one simple thing is introduce some nursery rhymes.
Sounds fun. Brenda, what do you think?
I don't think I can say it enough, but talk to children. Narrate their day. Tell them what you're going to do, why you're going to do that, what the result of that is going to be. Don't be afraid to introduce more complex words when you talk to children. They can handle it, right? Somebody told me a long time ago if children can say dinosaur words like Brachiosaurus and
Mhm.
Tyrannosaurus Rex, like they can handle other large words. Don't be afraid. And then just also, when you reading to those children, don't forget those non-mobile infants. Toddlers
Yeah.
are great. They come up to you with book in hand, they plop in your lap. Message sent, read to me. But we can't forget those little ones who don't have that mobile ability as well. So easy things, it's just making them priority in your day.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And yeah, you're right. I think sometimes we forget about the little babes. So that's a great reminder. I know you both work with providers across the state. So, um, what do you think of, like, I don't know if advice is the right word, but encouraging ideas or thoughts that you might give to early educators who want to strengthen literacy in their programs, but also balance everything else that's on their plates? What do you think? Michelle, let's start with you.
Well, I think Brenda just gave us some great advice, and she said, talk to kids.
Yeah.
And so whether we're serving lunch and we're sitting at the table, engaging in conversation. And I always like to remind people that a conversation is not the same thing as an interrogation.
Hmm.
I think sometimes we ask kids, like, do you like green beans? Do you like green beans better than carrots? How many green beans do you have on your plate? Are you going to have, and it's like, oh my gosh, I would never want to have lunch with that person. I'm like, yikes. Ask questions that you don't know the answers to. wow, I saw you building a castle over in the block area. How did you come up with that idea? What did you do? That kind of truly just a conversation. I
Open-ended.
think
Yep.
that's one of the best ways, that we can engage kids. And I love that Brenda talked about vocabulary words, big, juicy, $5 words. Kids have big ideas. They need big words to be able to communicate their ideas. And if we give them those words in context, when it makes sense to them, they're excited to use it. And we know, I mean, I keep talking about later academic success, but sometimes we get so worried about, are we preparing kids for kindergarten, that we forget about the joy of early childhood. And
Mhm.
things like vocabulary, very highly linked to academic success. And so, don't be afraid to introduce those words. Look at a book and, ask yourself what words are in this story that kids may not understand, and how could I, without ruining the book, the story, how could I very easily define that word? So if I'm reading The Three Little Bears, how could I say, and they lived in a cottage that's like a really tiny house in the woods? And
Mhm.
and so, keep it going. I think, to me, that language, and then don't forget about the written word. Long before they can actually write words, they can make meaningful marks on paper. And when they make meaningful marks on paper, they are well on their way to being able to write words. So
Mhm.
give them lots of opportunities to see the importance of written language.
That's awesome. It makes me think of when I would always have my mentor text with the sticky note on the inside flap, and these are the vocabulary words that we got to cover first, and it's always just a good reminder because I think it's a simple step, but it really promotes that reading comprehension. And especially I have always worked with multilingual learners. And so I'm always thinking about those kiddos who might not have as much exposure to English and so or sometimes Spanish, and just, helping them out a little bit and making sure that they feel included in the conversation. So it's a great idea. Um, Brenda, what about you?
I think despite the busyness of the day in the life of an early childhood provider, um, be intentional, have books available, look at that book again. What are those vocabulary words that you might want to do? Um, where in your day, in your routine, in your daily schedule, are you reading? When are you talking? Reading books to children needs to be that golden time of day that always happens, no matter what the craziness of life is, or no fire drill, parent tour, all
Yeah.
those things that happen. Reading still needs to be there. Um, and of course, talking, writing, all those pieces come together. So I think just the reminder to be intentional with what you're doing.
I'm thinking about on one of our previous episodes, we talked about digital literacy and iPads and how that's so tricky. And I want to talk a little bit about families. So I know, most of our providers are working closely with families on supporting literacy at home. Um, and so I don't want to go on a tangent, but I'm just curious if either of you are comfortable answering. Um, eh, what do you encourage with the realities that we're facing with technology, because so many of these things that you're mentioning, for example, nursery rhymes or even vocabulary words, that's something that I've used with my nephew. Like, he's super interested in dinosaurs. It's funny that you mentioned that. And so we'll look up a certain type of dinosaur, or we're reading a book and then we'll say, he says, well, I want to learn more about that bird or that dinosaur. Okay, let's look it up. And so we've found ways to kind of connect the iPad with his learning. It's tricky because it's a fine line there. But are either of you comfortable with that, just answering, like, as far as, it doesn't have to be just literacy, but just with iPad use and all these things you're talking about, have you found ways, especially with coaching, okay, good ways to use technology? Or what would you say, what are your thoughts on technology use with this age even?
I mean, I would be very hesitant for our littlest learners. And I don't remember who said it first, but I remember the phrase, just to remember there is no app to replace your lap. And I love that. There is something very different in the experience of sharing a book that you hold in your hands and turning the pages, um, pointing to the pictures, pausing when you can see that the kids are like questioning something. And those things don't come across when a story is being shared on the iPad. It is much more difficult actually to maintain children's interest. When I'm sharing a book and when it's a favorite book of mine, and I'm familiar with it, so I know how to make it come alive. I know when to pause. I know that on this page I need to say, oh my gosh, did you see that? Who's peeking around the corner here? Oh, you're right. I wonder why. Let's see if we can figure it out. You don't get that in the in an app. You talked about including children who are learning multiple languages at the same time. I could pause and introduce a word in Spanish, or I could refer to things. I could talk about a similar book that we read. It becomes a shared experience, and so I'm not saying there's no place for those things. But I also, when I'm talking with providers, I'm also saying to them, my guess is that a lot of the kids are having opportunities once they leave their time with you. While, somebody is at home making dinner, they may be on some, device. While, they're in the car, they may be on some device. So is that the best use of the limited time that we have with them? Like what Brenda said, let's just be really intentional. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you.
And Michelle, all I can do is echo them. And when you talk about that engagement, that really is the difference. When you can sit and, oh, well, how do you think that girl's feeling? What what do you think is going to happen next? Those pieces don't happen on a screen.
Right.
We can't replicate them. So that really becomes the missing link. And I think once you've had a young child on your lap and read to them, it's an experience that you as an adult want to do over and over and over again as well, because it's such a joy-filled opportunity. And again, that doesn't happen with a screen. So,
yeah, no, those are great. I see, we're all nodding. So for those of you that can't see the video, there's a lot of nodding happening. Yes, yes, yes. Well, thank you for going off script with me for a moment. So back to one more question about just thinking about ways that you've seen programs successfully engage families in early literacy practices. And Brenda, we'll start with you.
sure. One of the things I love to see is just having books available. So when I see a program that has a cozy little space where a parent and a child can just pause, read a book, enjoy that time together. When schools hold book fairs, they're saying books are important. Inviting parents in to read to children, right? That's a great one. We all have so many programs these days have apps and different ways of communicating with parents. So again, using that as a tool to your benefit. I saw little Joey turning pages of a book today, and he was turning those pages. That's an early literacy skill, right? So helping to educate the parents, seeing the day-to-day activities that are happening, but showing them the learning that's happening in that moment. So there's a great ability that we have to share that information and to help parents see, oh, I am doing those things, or oh, I had no idea that that was a skill, right? That's pre-literacy.
Yeah, that's good. Michelle, what do you think?
I love those examples that Brenda just shared. I think just encouraging families to share books with their children. And it can be as simple as, just pointing out the pictures, talking about what they see. Of course, talk, talk, talk. Encouraging families to play with language, to make up silly rhyming games, or even things like when you're going to the grocery store, um, you know, maybe encouraging the kids to make a list by, scribble writing on paper or saying, okay, we're going to look for that chicken noodle soup that you really like. We're going to look for one that has red and white on the label, and then we've got to find the C for chicken. Let's see which we can do that. And making it into a game where they can see the purpose of literacy. Because the thing is, when kids see the purpose behind things, you almost can't stand in their way of them starting to learn about it. I think Brenda was really spot on when she said just helping, families see what they're doing to encourage kids in book awareness, what they're doing to help kids understand, language comprehension. They're working at it all the time. They may not know the specific things that they're doing actually influence success. And so we can be their cheerleaders.
Mm-hmm. Coming full circle. Here we go.
Absolutely.
Very good. We are getting toward the end of our time, which is shocking. I can't believe that. It's gone by very quickly. But before my very last question, I have a listener question. This is exciting, something we're trying out this season. So, April, thank you so much for writing into us and asking this wonderful question. She asks, how can you tell if a child is struggling with early literacy? Um, Michelle, would you mind taking a stab at that first?
Sure. Well, first, that's kind of a tough question because with very young children, literacy can be, again, starts with listening, actually. And so, are they interested in language? Um, I guess one question I would have is once, that child is verbal, do they have a limited vocabulary? Do they have a hard time communicating their wants and needs? Have they shown some interest in making marks on paper or encouraging, listening to a story? And so, those could be indications of some kind of delay. Or quite honestly, it could be an indication of the adults just need to figure out a better way to sell some of those experiences so that the kid is like, oh, well, I can't miss out on that. That's pretty awesome. Brenda, I'm so
Yeah,
interested
it
in
is. It
what
is a
to
tricky
say.
question. Yeah. No, you did great. Thank you. What do you think, Brenda?
I think the other piece is to know that developmental sequence. What should children be doing at different ages and stages as they grow? Are they meeting those milestones? Because if you don't know what they should be doing, then you really can't support their learning. And so I think that's just the other piece. And I think maybe knowing some background, you've talked to Laura several times about dual language learners, sometimes
Mhm.
more than two languages. What's influencing, because that's going to look very different developmentally than a child who's just learning one language. So it's knowing developmentally, but also knowing that child individually. So those would
Absolutely.
things that I would add to what Michelle has already said.
That's great. And thank you, April, for asking us a hard question. We appreciate it. Well, I always like to end with the same question. It's the teacher in me. So I love to hear stories about people's favorite children's books. And you can really however your brain, whatever road that takes you down. So maybe as an educator, as a parent, just you as a child, do you have a favorite children's book or some special read aloud moment that stands out to you in your memory, Brenda?
Well, I have to say, Laura, that one of the things that has been this aha to me, if you will, is my own child who is now an adult and her peers are having children. And her go-to is buying children's books for those babies. And when her friends are like, how do you know all this? Like, she's just like, did your parents never read to you? Like, how do you not know about all of this richness that's available out there? So it's one of those times you don't realize the impact you're having. So I love that she has just picked up on that piece, if you will. There's also a children's book by Sandra Boynton that's called Woohoo, You're Doing Great. And I love that book because it applies to an adult and it applies to a child. And we all need to be reminded that, woohoo, you're doing great.
I agree. I love those. I love that your daughter's been paying attention and sees the value of read alouds and even has go-to. I mean, you've done the work. You've done it. Well done. Those are great examples. Thank you. Michelle, what about you? What comes to mind?
Okay, this is the hardest question by far that you have asked because I truly, truly love children's books, like beyond what is rational and normal in any sense. So, gosh, two come to mind immediately that are a little bit older, but I absolutely love, and both because I shared them in my classrooms as a teacher, but also shared them with my boys as they were growing up. One would be Wolf's Coming by Joe Kolka, which it's got a great sense of humor. And it's just this idea that, Wolf's coming. And there's a lot of suspense. And then there's a twist. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but there's a twist at the end that is pretty magnificent. And then another one that I absolutely love is Anansi and the Moss-Covered Rock by Eric Kimmel. It is an old African fable, but there's, again, a lot of humor as the spider figures out that there's some magical properties of this rock and that he can trick the other animals and get all of their, bananas or coconuts or whatever it is, except that little mule deer is always watching and kind of figures it out and decides to flip the script and play the trick on the spider. So there's a lot of laughter, a lot of humor in that book. I really do kind of have the sense of humor of a 4-year-old. So those kinds of things.
I knew I liked you.
It's, but yeah, anytime you want to talk children's books, I will volunteer and happily do that with you.
Down. I appreciate that. Well, I am sad to see our time ending, but I just want to say thank you so much, Brenda. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you for sharing your stories. You're just wonderful stories. I could listen all day. Your wisdom, your joy, your passion. Thank you so much for spending your time as well, just sharing your insights and experiences. You've given us a lot of practical, encouraging ideas for ways that providers can build literacy into daily routines and also see it as a central part of quality. So thank you.
Happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Awesome. And thank you to our listeners for tuning into Quality Time. We hope today's episode gave you new inspiration to bring back to your classrooms and programs. So join us next time as we continue celebrating Nebraska's amazing early childhood professionals who are stepping up to quality every day. Until then, bye-bye.